The man who killed his grandparents to see what it feels like, Edmund Kemper, is a name that sends chills down the spine of many true crime lovers. The gruesome murders he committed in the 1970s left an everlasting mark on criminal psychology. But have you wondered who he really is and what drove him to commit such heinous crimes? Today, we're going to be talking about the twisted tale of one of history's most notorious serial killers. Born on 18th December 1948 in Burbank, California, Edmund Kemper was the only son born to his parents, Clarnell and Edmund Sr. He had two sisters, Susan and Allen. Before we get to talking about Edmund himself, it's important to discuss the history of the person who made him the man he became, his mother. When Clarnell was young, she was the brightest child, with the best grades and an ambition to do the best, which included marrying the average American Prince Charming. So of course, she married Edmund Sr., a 6'8" Special Forces commando in the Army. At one point, Ed Sr. went to war and was a part of the Devil's Brigade, a group that was known to tackle the riskiest missions. Oftentimes, soldiers from this group don't make it out alive. In one such mission, while fighting against a German task force, Ed Sr. was part of the 23% of the soldiers who survived. This impacted the man quite a bit, and he was no longer the strong, tall, and scary soldier he once was. His mental and physical health were both affected. What made this worse was his wife's constant nagging. He even claimed that his days fighting in the war were much better than his days with his wife. Clarnell was clearly disappointed that Ed Sr. was no longer the charming man he once was, and amidst all this, she gave birth to Edmund, who was the product of a toxic relationship. Shortly after his birth, his parents separated, and he grew up with his mother, who would constantly subject him to ridicule at the hands of his sisters. This ridicule led to Edmund despising his sisters, and in retaliation, he would rip off their dolls' heads, a subtle foreshadowing of his future endeavors. He was known to have dark fantasies and a wicked imagination. One time when he was sitting at the dinner table with his older sister, she was teasing him about the crush he had on his teacher, asking him why he didn't kiss her. Edmund replied, "If I kiss her, I'd have to kill her first." He displayed signs of antisocial behavior from a very young age. Like many serial killers, Edmund had a tendency to get pleasure from animal cruelty. When he was 10 years old, he buried their family cat alive. Then he dug the cat up, decapitated it, and presented it on a stick. 3 years later, he killed another pet cat that he believed was favoring his little sister more than him. When Clarnell found out about her son's activities, she locked him up in the basement as she feared Edmund would harm his sisters. Not only that, but she would constantly make fun of his size, as he was tall and bulky, standing at 6'4". She would often refer to him as a real weirdo. Edmund once overheard his mother telling his father that she doesn't show him affection because she fears it will, quote, turn him gay, and would tell him that no woman would ever love him as he is just like his father, who, as we all know, was Clarnell's biggest disappointment. It's been assumed that Clarnell might have had borderline personality disorder. The young Edmund wasn't just subjected to abuse at the hands of his mother, but also his elder sister, who once tried to push him in front of a moving train and almost killed him. Another time, she tried to drown him by pushing him into the deep end of a swimming pool. The only person who Edmund had a close and seemingly normal relationship with was his father. Therefore, when he was 14, he ran away from his mother's home to reconcile and live with him in Van Nuys, California. When he reached his father's home, he discovered that he had married again and even had a stepson. After staying in Van Nuys for a short while, Ed Sr. sent his son to live with his paternal grandparents in Sierra Nevada. Edmund hated living there and described his grandfather as senile and stated that his grandma was constantly emasculating me and my grandfather. On 27th August 1964, after an argument with his grandmother, Edmund fatally shot her once in the head and twice in the back. He then stabbed her several times. After killing his grandmother, he shot his grandfather in the driveway when he returned home. He then called his mother and told her what happened. She advised him to call the police, which he did. Shortly after, he was arrested, and his crimes were considered incomprehensible to commit for a 15-year-old. He was also diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia by a court psychologist. This led him to being sent to Atascadero State Hospital, a facility for mentally ill convicts. During his time at the hospital, the doctors there claimed that he had been misdiagnosed and that he had a less severe condition known as personality trait disturbance, passive-aggressive type. He was described as intelligent by the doctors there, and his IQ test proved a result of 145. Considered an ideal prisoner by the psychiatrists, Edmund was also trained to administer psych tests to the other prisoners. During his second arrest, he claimed that administering these tests allowed him to understand how they work and use that to manipulate his psychiatrists, confessing that the sex offenders taught him a lot. On Edmund's 21st birthday in 1969, he was released on parole from the hospital, despite his doctor's objections. He was let go into the care of his mother, who had remarried and now lived in California. In the years after his release, he showed his psychiatrist signs of rehabilitation, which led to the permanent removal of his juvenile records. Edmund attended community college while he was staying with his mother and aspired to become a police officer. However, he was rejected due to his size. Nonetheless, he tried his best to be friendly with the local cops and became a part of the gang. He then went on to get a job with the State of California Division of Highways. During this time, he constantly argued with his mother, which led to him moving out of her house and in with a friend living in Alameda. However, this didn't stop Clarnell from interfering in Edmund's life, as she would constantly call him and pay surprise visits as well. Edmund almost met and got engaged to a 17-year-old in 1973, which broke off after his second arrest. While he was working in the highway division, he was hit by a car and received a $15,000 settlement, which he used to buy a car. This is what led to the start of a chain of horrific murders, as he would use this car to help women who were hitchhiking reach their destinations. Initially, he would just pick them up and drop them off, until one day when the murderous urge kicked in. On May 7, 1972, he offered two students from Fresno State, Mary Ann and Anita Luchessa, a ride to their destination. However, they never made it there, and their parents reported them missing. It wasn't until August 15th, when the authorities found Mary Ann's decapitated head in the woods near Santa Cruz, that their mystery was solved. After his arrest, Edmund stated that he had strangled and stabbed Mary Ann before stabbing Anita. He then took the bodies to his apartment and removed their heads and hands while also being intimate with the corpses. A few months later, in September 1972, Edmund picked up a 15-year-old Aiko Ku, who would face the same fate as Mary Ann and Anita. Moreover, in January 1973, he picked up another hitchhiker, Cindy Schall, who he killed by shooting. He then took her body home and hid it in his room while his mother was out, and dismembered it the following day. He later disposed of the parts in the ocean and buried the head in his mother's backyard. On February 5, 1973, he picked up two students, Rosalind Thorpe and Alice Liu, from the University of California. Edmund then fatally shot the two girls, after which he decapitated them, removed the bullets from their heads, dismembered their bodies, and disposed of them off in various locations. In April 1973, he committed his final two murders when he killed his mother and her friend. After an unpleasant altercation, Edmund attacked his mother while she was sleeping. He first struck a hammer on her head and then cut her throat with a knife. He then decapitated her head and chopped off her hands. He also removed his mother's larynx, aka her voice box, and put it down the garbage disposal. After killing his mother, he called her friend, Sally Hallett, over to the home. When she arrived, he strangled her and hid the body in a closet. Edmund then fled the scene and a while later called the Santa Cruz police to confess his crimes. At first, they didn't believe the Big Ed they knew could be such a gruesome murderer, but the interrogations they conducted soon revealed that Big Ed was indeed the infamous co-ed killer. Edmund was charged with 8 counts of first-degree murder and went to trial in October 1973. On November 8th, a 6-man and 6-woman jury found him to be guilty on all counts. When he was asked by the judge what he believed his punishment should be, he replied, "Death by torture." However, he was instead awarded 8 consecutive life sentences. To this day, he is serving his time in the California Medical Facility in Vacaville. When he was sent there, he was evaluated again by the psychiatrists who diagnosed him with antisocial, narcissistic, and schizotypal personality disorders. Between the years 1979 and 2024, he has been denied parole 10 times by the court. His next parole eligibility is in 2031. During his parole hearing last year, it was revealed that Edmund was wheelchair-bound and suffered from coronary heart disease as well as diabetes. Moreover, a psychiatrist analyzed that even in 2024, if he were to be released, he would be at high risk to reoffend. That's all we have for you today. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe for more such content.